that would localize the cloud to only the EU, and you couldn't have this free flow of information, which really kind of defeats the purpose in large part for why the cloud was invented in the first place. So that's the danger, right? So we don't want countries starting, having their own cloud that has no interconnectivity to the international world.
So I'm going to shift gears on you a little bit to an issue that is on top of mind for a lot of folks, or has been top of mind for a lot of folks until I guess the last few days: semiconductors. You've been an outspoken voice on the need to do more from a U.S. government perspective to enhance our ability to manufacture, design, and produce semiconductor chips here. Obviously, your congressional district is one that houses lots of technology companies. As you look at kind of the semiconductor environment and what's happening congressionally, how do you see this issue resolving itself? How do you see the kind of the House and the Senate coming together to resolve differences in their bills around funding for semiconductors? And how are constituents of yours, companies in your district, talking to you about the need for the United States to lead in the semiconductor space?
Before COVID, if you said supply chain, nobody would know what you're talking about, nor would they care until they held up their medical. They corner 85% of rare earth minerals that they get through Belt and Road. And when I say they, I'm talking about China, out of Africa, Latin America. But then the semiconductor piece, to me, is the most critical right now. 90% of the advanced semiconductor chips are manufactured in Taiwan. So I talked to then Secretary Pompeo and Wilbur Ross and then National Security Advisor O'Brien about how can we manufacture more of this here or with our allied countries. We have to get it away from communist China where it's vulnerable, because we know that the Chinese are trying to infiltrate in Taiwan and infiltrate TSMC. So that is what led to the sort of, the expansion, if you will, of TSMC in Arizona was based on that premise. But we had to provide incentives for them to do this. So we took that idea and I introduced the Chips for America Act. Senator Cornyn introduced the companion. Doris Matsui, my Democrat colleague, I found after 9 terms, if you're not willing to work across the aisle, you're not going to get anything done. Because legislation, that's just the way it works. And then, we've garnered a lot of bipartisan support. Everybody from Schumer to, McCarthy to Pelosi. And everyone likes the idea of, well, hey, if we incentivize manufacturers to relocate into the United States, that not only creates jobs and opportunities and investment in the United States, but it's also a national security piece. Chips are in everything, as you all know, from your phone to our most advanced weapon systems. And if they're compromised, and we know that our foreign adversaries would like to, or stolen, then we have a real problem. Since we got this bill authorized on the National Defense Authorization Bill, and since that time, you've seen enormous investment in the United States. Now, we're not finished yet, but Samsung in my district expanded $17 billion. Intel, $20 billion. Micron's looking at $100 to $150 billion investment here in the United States. And there aren't very many of these companies, but where they are, they're looking at, but they're CEOs, they have shareholders, they need certainty that this idea is going to actually work. So I could maybe talk too long on this, but I got a call from the Secretary of Commerce saying, hey, really like your CHIPS bill. Can we just pass that thing on its own, a clean bill? I said, that would be great. It'd be great for the country in America, not just Republicans, great for the administration to get a victory. Then like Congress does best, we screwed it up. So they put all this other poison pill stuff in, like $8 billion to a UN climate fund that could go to China where they manufacture batteries and solar panels in the Xinjiang province where they commit genocide. So it didn't seem like that was very good policy to me to muck up this CHIPS bill with all this other stuff. So here's where we are now. We're doing what's called a conference committee. We haven't done one of these in a while. You must have worked on the Hill. So the Senate actually, I don't normally applaud the Senate. They did a pretty good job. They passed my CHIPS bill and then what's called the Endless Frontiers, which is a heavy investment in research and development and everything from National Science Foundation to DARPA. You know, if we're going to compete with China that's putting $1 trillion in its digital economy, that's everything from AI to 5G to quantum, you name it. They just shot a hypersonic off that we didn't think they had, but they do. Circled the world and landed with precision with a nuclear payload. And we don't have that, and we can't stop it because it maneuvers. So we're behind. We have to compete is the point. And that's the point of this bill. My bill on the semiconductor manufacturing side, and then a heavy investment in research and development to not catch up, but just compete primarily with globally with the great competition of our generation, that is against communist China. Long term, they're the greatest national security threat to the United States. So that's why this bill is so important. So I'll be on a conference committee, and we're going to try to strip all this stuff, poison pills, out of from the House side, merge it with the Senate, and then it goes House, Senate to the president. The White House I was in the Oval Office with President Biden, and there were 8 of us, half of us tech, half auto manufacturer members, and he said, "This is great. I wish every meeting I have was like this," because everyone supports it. And that's why I'm optimistic it will get over the finish line, because there is so much support for it, from Schumer to the president, from Pelosi to McCarthy. And when we do, you're already seeing the investment, but you're going to see an explosion of investment. We also have a multinational piece to it for our allies as well. I don't care as long as we're manufacturing this in places where it's not vulnerable to IP theft being stolen, which they know how to do very well.
I think the multinational piece of that has garnered great attention, particularly in Europe. Right, is something that the United States wants to do in collaboration with allied countries, and makes good sense, and is something that we should push forward.
Since the introduction of our bill, we're seeing European countries introducing the same thing. So we're, in a way, it's a global competition all the way around. But if it's with our allies, that's where it needs to be.
Let's stay on this China theme for a minute, because you've been spending a lot of time for the last year and a half as part of the China task force that you've got with a bunch of your colleagues in the House, looking at these issues of kind of U.S. technological superiority, U.S. technological kind of challenges vis-a-vis China, U.S. industrial policy vis-a-vis China. How do you see kind of this kind of great power competition shaping up with the U.S. and China, and what should Congress's role be in order to advance policies that help the United States stay on or maintain or get a better footing when it comes to competing with China and other countries like that?
Yeah, great question. So I chaired this China task force. We came out with like 400 recommendations. Mostly bipartisan, many of which have passed. But the Chips for America Act was the number one recommendation. But we also, there's a panoply of issues, but the overarching goal is to be more competitive, because we're not. We're not in Africa. We're losing in South America. Indo-Pacific, we need economic alliances like with trade, and we need to. But when it comes to competing with China, they invest huge amounts of capital in research and development. And this is why I think, this bill that I was talking about, it's imperative that we pass it to be, more competitive, or they're going to start going ahead, just like with the hypersonic weapon, that now we're trying to catch up, to them. Huawei, they're installing that all over. The Belt and Road Initiative is brilliant. They are very, very clever. Under the UN, they're a developing nation. So what does that mean? They qualify for almost interest-free loans from the World Bank that they can then turn around and loan to truly developing nations at a usurious interest rate, get them into a debt trap, take their rare earth minerals, put their own workers in, and then, hey, we want that port or that military base. This is happening throughout the Indo-Pacific, Africa, Latin America. and we're finally waking up. And I think COVID, we woke up to some extent. Not to digress, I'll make this really fast. In 1997, I was a federal prosecutor here, and I prosecuted this guy, Johnny Chung. And he led us to the director of Chinese intelligence, China Aerospace, putting money in his Hong Kong bank account to put in the presidential election. And why? Two things. They wanted the dual-use technology and the satellites, and they wanted to get in the WTO, and they got both of those. And since that time, they have progressed tremendously, in that space. They're in space, by the way. That's why we created the Space Force. So they are, their technology capabilities, and this will get to the heart of your question. We gave them a lot back in the day, and we tried to bring them in the family of nations. I talked to Secretary Baker. He goes, we tried. We wanted them to be more of a democracy and, capitalism, and bring them in the family of nations. And, he said it just didn't work. And so we gave them a lot. What we didn't give them, they stole. There's a reason why the Houston consulate was shut down, because they were stealing all this IP from our universities, our Texas Medical Center, NASA. And then I would say what they haven't stolen, we sell to them. If you look at the hypersonic, a lot of that's built on the backbone of American technology. And so this gets me into what we call the Export Control Act, which is under Foreign Affairs jurisdiction. In fact, we're doing some of these sanctions against Russia right now on semiconductors. There are these entities list. Department of Commerce has one. Department of Defense has one. But they're not the same. DOD's is more security. Commerce is more, industry. So you look at this this Bureau of Industry and Security within Commerce. We got this information, and I was able to make it public, that just in the last year alone, only 1% of the export licenses were denied, and that $60 billion was going into China from the United States to invest in Huawei, $40 billion into China to invest in SMIC, which is their semiconductor company. So why are we doing this? We want to marry the list. So these are entities that would go straight to the PLA, straight into their military apparatus. Now, some of it's civil military fusion, but these are companies that if you invest in there, you're investing in China's military program that's going to turn right back at us. So we have to, in my judgment, and this is not going to be an easy thing to do, navigating through all this, but we have to stop exporting this technology to our adversary that uses it to build its war machine that they're turning against us. And you don't think President Xi's looking at Taiwan right now with Putin and what he's doing in Ukraine? I'm worried that the next Xi is going to be Xi, because he's always wanted Taiwan. He sees weakness. And if he goes into Taiwan, and yet the South China Sea, it's very strategic. But what else? As I mentioned before, 90% of our advanced semiconductor chip manufacturing. So this is going to be a really interesting the next Congress, stay tuned because we're going to get, hopefully do some big things that are going to, at the end of the day, protect American companies and our technology and our national security.
All right, so I'd like to end this session on a little bit of a different note by having you talk about one of your colleagues, a member that you've worked a lot with over the years, Jim Langevin, who's announced he won't be seeking re-election this fall. You and he have worked together on countless cybersecurity issues over the years. You and he have formed a great bipartisan duo on a lot of these matters as it relates to DHS and security issues and technology issues. Talk a little bit about kind of your work with him over the years and what you think his departure is going to mean for congressional cybersecurity policy leadership and kind of who maybe you see as kind of the next generation on the Democratic side where you can team up with some folks.
Yeah. Well, first, you're making me feel kind of old. I'd wake up and I'm like, Mike, this is my 9th term. I never thought, but it kind of symbolizes the passing of an era. We wrote that CSIS report, 15 years ago, before it was cool to be in cyber. Now everybody talks about cyber, and with some really talented people, but there's something missing today that is wrong. That I think hopefully we'll be able to fix it through the American people. And it's this intense political division that goes beyond a debate on policy, but rather you're an enemy and you're an evil, bad person, right? If you're on the other side of the aisle. And it's on both sides. You have extremities on both my side of the aisle and from the left and the right. But it hurts the body politic. The way the founding fathers set this up was compromise was necessary to get anything done. Today, it's a dirty word. If I went back home to my district and said, what I'm most proud of is I got ranked by the Lugar Institute as and Georgetown, most effective Republican. You know why? Because I'm bipartisan. But you know what? If I went home to my base and told them that, they'd probably throw me out of office. Like, we didn't elect you to get along with you need to fight. Okay, we have plenty of fights, but we also have to get things done. And the only way to get things done is, hey, I've got a great idea on breach notification, right? Who am I going to go to? I can go to one of my side of the aisle, but if I really want it to pass, it's got to be bipartisan. And so I go to Jim. And he's just a fantastic guy. He's not an ideologue. He's very policy driven. He loves cybersecurity, the issue. I'm going to miss him a lot because I think he's irreplaceable, to answer your question. But I think there are a lot of younger members now that they understand this stuff a lot better than when I first got elected. But beyond the issue of cyber, I think is just the damage to, the institution. And I hope, we can repair some of that damage in the years to come and get back to some decency. Chairman Meeks and I don't agree on everything, but we're pragmatic, and we basically have an understanding. Like, look, you're not going to agree on it with everything I want to do, and vice versa. But it's like when I just came out of Israel, right? They put 10 parties together in the Knesset. Can you imagine that? And I said, how'd you do that? They said, well, we realized that we agree actually on 70% of the issues. It's the 30% that we fight over. And so they have this bond between all these different parties. We'll see how that goes. But that's probably reflective, of the Congress. We probably agree on cyber. That's almost a 100% issue. But we probably agree on 70%. It's that 30% that you probably see on television or being debated in public. But anyway, the chairman and I, we can agree to disagree, but we can do so with civility. And we don't have to be disrespectful of each other. I disagree with their views, but I respect that. I think they're misguided, but I respect that. And I'm not going to throw a temper tantrum and start yelling and screaming, which I think is very immaturish. And you see a lot of members do that now, and they go on TV, to get attention, or social media has changed politics forever. And they'll go on YouTube and rant and rave, and you know what? They get a lot of clicks, and they raise a lot of money off it. But they don't give a darn about getting anything done in the Congress. I don't care. I didn't get elected to go on social media or YouTube and rant and rave. I got elected to get things done. And I hope that we start to get some of that back, Well,
that's a great way to end this session. Thank you very much for doing it. I've asked everyone to please join me in thanking the Congressman for being here today. Thank you, sir, for doing it. Appreciate it.
Well done.